whisper. Because the whisper isn't for the crowd. The whisper is for the close. If you ain't close, you'll miss it. So what if these 3 days were about getting close again? Close enough to feel, close enough to discern, close enough to recognize the difference between your voice and someone else's. Some of y'all have been echoing other people's fears for so long, you forgot what your faith sounds like. But you're about to get reacquainted. You're about to reintroduce yourself to yourself. See, when you silence the noise, something sacred happens. The fog begins to lift. The clutter starts to clear. You start to realize maybe you're not confused. Maybe you're just distracted. Maybe clarity didn't leave you. Maybe it's just been buried under everyone else's expectations. And if you stop letting people rent space in your head for free, you might finally find the room to build something new. You've been trying to hear direction while standing in the middle of a storm of voices. But direction don't come in chaos. It comes in stillness. And that's why this ain't just about being quiet. It's about being intentional. Get by yourself. Pull away from the crowd. Not forever, just 3 days. 3 days to break the cycle. 3 days to shut the world out and shut the spirit in. 3 days to let silence strip away every lie you've been living under. Because when the noise dies down, the real you starts to speak. You'll start hearing things like, I'm still here. I still believe. I still want more. And those aren't just words. That's resurrection talking. That's buried dreams crawling back to the surface. That's destiny remembering. Over your destiny. People whose opinions have expired, but you're still carrying them like they matter. Still quoting them like they're scripture. Still rehearsing what they said in your head like it was truth. You've got to decide right now to turn it all down. Turn down the critics. Turn down the comparisons. Turn down the chaos. And not just the noise on the outside, but the noise on the inside too. I know the silence feels uncomfortable. I know it feels strange when it gets quiet. Because you've been using noise to avoid your own truth. But God does his best work in silence. The Bible says when Elijah went looking for God, he wasn't in an earthquake. He wasn't in a fire. He wasn't even in the wind. He came in a still, small voice. And some of y'all been chasing earthquakes, trying to hear him. What? You see, the first thing I need you to do before you speak a word, before you make a move, before you try to shift your whole life is this. You've got to silence the noise. I'm talking about that noise that never shuts up, that static in your mind that plays like a broken record, that endless commentary from people who don't even know your story, but still got the nerve to write chapters in your book. You've got to silence that, because until you quiet what's around you, you'll never hear what's inside you. Some of you can't move forward, not because you're not capable, but because you can't hear yourself think. Every time God tries to whisper something to you, the world drowns him out. Every time peace tries to knock, the noise of your doubt answers the door instead. You've been listening to voices that have no author, your name. But you can't hear it if you won't sit in the stillness. And I get it, it's hard. It's hard when you've been conditioned to perform, when your whole life has been about showing up, proving something, being strong, keeping up appearances. But silence doesn't care about your image. Silence cares about your truth. And sometimes you've got to strip it all down. Get real, get raw. Well, be vulnerable enough to say, God, I don't even know who I am anymore, but I'm ready to hear you again. You don't need another person to tell you who you are. You need the courage to listen to who you've always been. Deep down, past the hurt, past the pressure, past the pretending, there's a voice that's been waiting to be heard. A voice that says, you're still chosen. A voice that says, you're still worthy. A voice that says, I'm not done with you yet. But you won't hear it if you keep letting the noise be louder than your spirit. So I'm daring you not to shout, not to post, not to react, but just to be still. to stop running from yourself, to stop avoiding the silence, because it's not punishment, it's preparation. God is pulling you into a quiet place because he's about to speak something new. And it won't be loud, it won't be flashy, it won't be for everybody, but it'll be for you. And when you hear it, when it finally breaks through, you'll know exactly why you had to get quiet, and you'll never crave that noise again. Now that you've silenced the noise, now that you've pulled away from the distractions, it's time to do something most people never learn how to do. Speak life to yourself. I'm not talking about fake encourage. Be, but you don't defeat a lie with silence. You defeat a lie with truth. And the truth ain't just what you read. It's what you speak. You've got to open your mouth and say, I will not die here. I will not stay broken. I will not settle for less than what God has promised me. For just 3 days, I'm asking you to guard your mouth like your future depends on it, because it does. For 3 days, no negativity, no self-hate, no tearing yourself down. I want you to get up in the morning, look yourself in the mirror, and say things that make your fear tremble. Say things that sound too good to be true. Say things that stir up the atmosphere around you, because life and death are in the power of the tongue. And you've been speaking too much death over yourself. Every time you say, I'm tired of this, you reinforce it. I'm not talking about some Instagram caption you post to look strong while you're crumbling on the inside. I'm talking about opening your mouth and declaring life over yourself when no one else is around to cheer you on. When you're tired, when you're wounded, when you feel overlooked, underappreciated, empty, that's when you've got to learn how to speak life. You'd be surprised how many people can encourage others but can't lift themselves. You built everybody else up, poured into their dreams, been their rock, their light, their safe place. But when it comes to you, your words dry up. You get silent. You go cold. And in that silence, the enemy starts whispering, you're not enough. You'll never be whole. You'll always be stuck. But let me tell you something. He's a liar. Always has been, always will. Your chains. Every time you say, nothing ever works for me, you build your own prison. Every time you say, this is just how I am, you limit the possibility of who you could become. You got to speak something that moves you forward. I don't care how broken you feel, there is still a word of life inside you. Say, I'm coming out of this. Say, I'm becoming stronger. Say, I was built for this storm, because your soul is listening and your spirit is responding. And if all it's been hearing is defeat, no wonder you've been walking like you're lost. But something shifts when you talk different. Something changes when you align your mouth with your mission. The same mouth that curses your process can bless your progress. If you choose, I dare you to flip the script. I dare you to stop agreeing with your wrong you and start agreeing with your healing. I dare you to stop giving so much weight to your weakness and start giving voice to your strength. Yes, you're in pain, but pain isn't the whole story. Yes, you've made mistakes, but you're not disqualified. You're still chosen, still breathing, still here, and as long as there's breath in your body, there is power in your words. You don't need everyone else to validate it. You don't need a crowd. You just need to believe what you say about yourself. For too long, you've believed what they said. You've believed what the mirror told you, what your past shouted at you, what fear whispered in the dark. But now you've got to believe you. Not because you feel perfect, not because everything's figured out, but because something in you knows you were born for more. You may have cried last night, but this morning say, joy is coming. You may have failed yesterday, but today say, grace is covering me. You may feel weak right now, but say, I am stronger than this storm. For 3 days, I want you to prophesy over yourself. I want you to write it down, shout it out, sing it if you have to, but don't stay silent. Your healing is connected to your words. Your breakthrough is waiting on your voice. And the devil's greatest fear is not your pain. It's the moment you realize you can speak power in the middle of it. So speak. Even if your voice shakes, even if your faith is the size of a mustard seed, even if no one claps, no one hears, no one responds, speak anyway, because sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is talk yourself back into alignment. Talk yourself out of that grave you built with your own words. Talk yourself out of survival mode. Talk yourself back into life. And don't wait until you feel better to do it. Don't wait until it looks right. Start now. Speak now. Because life doesn't wait on your feelings. It responds to your words. Some of us have gotten so good at hiding that we don't even recognize ourselves anymore. We wear a smile like armor. We show up, polished, post the right things, say the right words, and yet deep down, we're running from the one person we can't escape, ourselves. But if you're going to talk to yourself for real, if you're going to do this thing for 3 days like I'm challenging you to, then at some point you're going to have to stop avoiding the mirror. You can't heal what you won't face. You can't overcome what you won't acknowledge. You can't walk in your purpose while running from your reflection. The mirror don't lie. That's why we avoid it. Not just the glass in your bathroom. I'm talking about the mirror of your soul, the mirror of your past, the mirror of your truth, that place inside where all the pretending stops and all the pain speaks. And I know. Facing yourself hurts. It's uncomfortable to confront the mess you've made, the bitterness you carried, the things you thought you buried but still bleed. It's easier to stay busy, to stay distracted, to stay numb. It's easier to scroll through someone else's life than sit still in your own. But there is no breakthrough in avoidance. There's only delay. There's only detour. And I don't want to see you live the next 10 years stuck in the same cycle because you were too afraid to look. Looking at yourself honestly doesn't mean condemning yourself. It doesn't mean shaming yourself. It means being courageous enough to say, this is where I am, but it's not where I'll stay. You can't change what you pretend not to see. You can't fix what you won't admit is broken. But if you'll stop blaming, stop excusing, stop running, something powerful will happen. You'll start to see yourself with clarity. You'll start to notice not just your flaws, but your fight. Not just the wounds, but the wisdom. Not just the past, but the possibility. You've been telling yourself, I'm fine, when you're not. You've been saying, it's all good, when it's not. You've been strong for so long that you forgot strength doesn't mean silence. You're allowed to say, I'm struggling. You're allowed to admit, I've been hurting. You're allowed to whisper, I'm tired. That doesn't make you weak, it makes you real. And God can't bless who you pretend to be. He can only bless who you truly are. So these 3 days, they're not about perfection, they're about honesty. They're about looking in that mirror and saying, yes, I've made mistakes. Yes, I've been angry. Yes, I've doubted. Yes, I've sabotaged myself. Yes, I've cried myself to sleep. But that's not the end of my story. Some of you are still carrying shame like it's part of your identity, still punishing yourself for things God has already forgiven, still letting guilt drag you down long after grace showed up. But what if you let go? What if you finally gave yourself permission to be free? You've got to stop defining yourself by the worst chapter in your life, that one bad decision, that broken relationship, that season of darkness, that moment when you lost your way. That is not the fullness of you. That is not the whole picture. But if you never look at it head on, if you never own it, it will own you. And I know what you're thinking, if I face it, I'll fall apart. No, baby. If you face it, you'll finally be able to rebuild. Sometimes things need to fall apart so truth can rise up from the rubble. Sometimes you've got to look at the cracked places to discover you didn't break. You bent, but you didn't break. Talking to yourself means calling out the lies you believe for too long. Lies like, I'm not good enough. Lies like, nothing ever works out for me. Lies like, I always be this way. Look yourself in the eye and call those lies what they are. Because the mirror doesn't just show you what's wrong, it shows you what's real. And real is where healing begins. So if you're going to do this, do it all the way. Stand in front of the mirror. Look yourself in the eye. Don't flinch. Don't look away and say it. This is me. This is my truth, but this is not my end. Because if you can face yourself, really face yourself, you can free yourself. Now that you've silenced the noise, now that you've looked yourself in the mirror and had that honest, painful, beautiful confrontation, now it's time to speak. I mean, really speak. I mean, open your mouth and prophesy to what looks dead. I mean, call things out that haven't moved in years. I mean, stand in the middle of your valley and tell your dry bones to get up and live. You know the story. A prophet standing in the valley of bones, scattered, lifeless, dry, no sign of breath, no hint of hope. And God asks him, can these bones live? And the prophet, honest and unsure, says, Lord, do you know? Then what does God tell him to do? Not to cry, not to walk away, not to wait, but to speak, to open his mouth and declare life over death. And I'm telling you today, that same authority is in you. There are places in your life that look like that valley right now, places that feel so dried up you don't even remember what it's like to hope. Dreams you gave up on, parts of your identity you buried. Faith that used to burn bright but now just flickers. You look at your situation and all you see is a graveyard. You see bones. And the enemy has convinced you that bones can't live again. But what if God brought you to that valley not to grieve but to prophesy? You think it's over because it doesn't look alive. But faith doesn't need to see signs. It needs to speak them. You've been waiting for something to change. Before you believe, before you act, before you speak. But God said, speak first. Speak to the bones while they're still bones. Speak while it's still dry. Speak before you see any shift. That's what faith is. Faith says, I don't see it, but I'm saying it anyway. Faith says, I don't feel it, but I believe it's coming. Faith says, I will not bury what God told me to breathe on. Some of you have been silent too long. You've stopped speaking over your calling. You've stopped speaking over your family. You've stopped speaking over your own soul. And now everything around you feels dead, but it's not dead because God left you. It's dead because you stopped talking to it. Your words have power. Not just to inspire, but to ignite. Not just to comfort, but to resurrect. And the moment you stop speaking, you surrender your authority. But the moment you start again, the moment you lift your voice and prophesy, not based on what you see, but based on what God said, things begin to move. Look at your dry bones and say, live. Look at your weary heart and say, beat again. Look at your gift that's been buried under fear and shame and say, rise. Look at that dream you tucked away years ago and say, it's not over, because your future is listening. Your healing is listening. Your next level is waiting on the sound of your faith. Don't you dare stand in front of something God gave you authority over and stay silent. Don't you dare walk away from that valley when the miracle is in your mouth. You don't a room. If you don't believe in you, nobody else will. That's the truth. And it's not about ego. It's not about arrogance. It's about agreement. You've got to come into agreement with what God already said about you. You've got to walk like it's already done, speak like it's already yours, stand like you know heaven backed you when you got up this morning. But see, here's the problem. Too many of us have been conditioned to doubt ourselves. Life has taught you to second guess everything, taught you to shrink, taught you to play it safe. Every time you tried to rise, somebody pulled you back. Every time you tried to shine, somebody told you it was too much. So now, even when you're free, you still act like you're in chains. Even when the door is wide open, you sit there asking if you're allowed to walk through. Thus bless the prophet. It became an army. And I wonder, what's waiting on you to speak that could become the very thing that changes generations? You don't need to have it all figured out. You just need the boldness to say what you believe, even if your knees are shaking, even if your heart is hurting, even if you're speaking through tears. Speak anyway. You were never meant to walk through your valley in silence. You were meant to shift it with your words. Speak. You ever notice how we spend so much of our lives trying to convince everybody else of our worth, but never take the time to convince ourselves? We chase validation like it's oxygen. We wait on applause before we take a step. We ask for permission to become what God already called us to be, and the whole time we're neglecting the most important voice in. You need more resources. You don't need more followers. You don't need another degree. You need to open your mouth and remind your situation who you are and whose you are. You cried long enough. You've waited long enough. You've doubted long enough, but now it's time to prophesy. Don't prophesy your fear, prophesy your future. Don't rehearse your trauma. Declare your triumph. Stop echoing your insecurity and start releasing the word. This isn't about hype. It's not about theatrics. It's about truth. And the truth is, what God gave you can't stay dead unless you let it. The truth is, you've got power in your voice that you haven't even tapped into yet. The truth is, this valley is not your grave, it's your assignment, because when those bones started coming together, when breath entered them, when life returned, it didn't the place where God develops what he's about to reveal. If you can't believe in yourself in the dark, you'll self-destruct when the lights come on. And that's why these 3 days of talking to yourself are so critical. Because if you don't believe you can make it, you won't. And I need you to hear me. What you say to yourself matters. And not just when you're in front of people, not just when you're feeling strong, but especially when you're by yourself and everything in you wants to give up. That's when your voice has the most power. Some of you are one self-believing sentence away from a breakthrough, one word away from the next level. But you keep waiting on somebody else to say it. Nah. You say it. You declare it, you affirm it, you speak it until your spirit catches up with your mouth. Stop saying you're not ready. But hear me. The moment you start believing what God whispered in your spirit more than what life shouted in your ears, that's the moment everything starts to shift. You've got to stop waiting for someone else to clap for you before you take the stage. Stop asking for confirmation from people who can't comprehend the level you headed to. Stop explaining your purpose to folks who weren't in the room when God gave it to you. They don't get it because it wasn't theirs. It was yours. You have to know who you are when nobody's affirming you, when the phone's not ringing, when the platform's not calling, when nobody's reposting you. Can you still believe you're chosen? Can you still believe you're called? Can you still believe you're anointed for this, even in obscurity? Because obscurity is a training ground. It's you are. Stop saying you're not enough. You are. Stop saying you're too broken, too old, too late. That's not your truth. That's your trauma talking. And if you keep feeding yourself the language of defeat, don't be surprised when your life follows. You've got to learn how to become your own encourager, your own fire starter, your own reminder. I'm not saying we don't need people, we do. But if your belief is built on their belief, what happens when they leave? What happens when they change? What happens when they can't see what you see? You better know who you are when no one else does. And I mean really know it. Not just quoting scriptures, not just repeating affirmations you saw online, but deeply, intimately, undeniably convinced that there is something inside of you that this world needs, that your voice matters, that your presence matters, that your story, flawed and complicated and raw, is still worthy of being heard. Because once you truly believe in you, you stop negotiating with doubt. You stop shrinking to fit in rooms you were born to lead. You stop second guessing every idea, every move, every instinct. And you start walking like you're already approved, not by man, by God. You stop performing and start producing. You stop surviving and start living. You stop wondering if you're enough and start showing up like you know you are. So for the next few days, I dare you to change your inner conversation. When that voice rises up and says, you can't do this, answer it with, watch me. When it says, who do you think you are? Say, I know exactly who I am. When it tries to remind you of your past, remind it of your purpose. Remind it that you've been through hell and still got breath in your body. Remind it that you're not built to break. Talk like someone who knows they're going somewhere. Move like someone who's already seen the end from the beginning. Speak to yourself like your future depends on it, because it does. You don't need more proof. You just need more belief. The real question is this. After you talk to yourself for 3 days, then what? Because anybody can shout for a moment. Anybody can write down a few declarations. Anybody can get hyped off a sermon or a podcast or a post. But what happens when the moment ends and life goes back to normal? What happens when Monday comes and you're no longer inspired, just tired? See, the last thing I want for you is to have a 3-day spark and a lifetime of silence. I didn't challenge. I need you to talk to yourself just so you could feel better for a few days. I challenge you so you could remember how to live, so you could awaken something inside of you that doesn't go back to sleep. This isn't about a temporary high. This is about building a permanent shift. And the only way to sustain it is with discipline. I know that's not a popular word. We love breakthroughs. We love anointing. We love overflow and favor. But none of that matters if you don't have the discipline to maintain what God gives you. It's easy to believe when the atmosphere is charged. Easy to talk to yourself when the crowd is cheering, when the lights are on. But what about when it's quiet? What about when it's just you and your thoughts at 3 a.m. and the fear comes creeping back in? What about when the things you spoke in faith don't try to call you again? Just because you broke the silence doesn't mean the lies won't return. But this time, you won't be caught off guard. This time, you'll know how to fight back, not with your fists, but with your faith, with your discipline, with the daily decision to feed your future instead of your fear. You don't have to be loud. You just have to be consistent. Consistency builds confidence. Confidence builds clarity. And clarity helps you walk like you belong, even in places that used to intimidate you. I know some of you have tried before. You started speaking life, started building a new mindset, started walking in purpose, and then life knocked the wind out of you. And you went quiet again. You shut down again. But can I tell you something? That fall wasn't your failure. It was your training ground. To affirm your value, practice your worth daily. Build your belief like it's a routine, not a rescue. It's just like going to the gym. You don't lift one time and walk away expecting transformation. No, you commit, you train, you sweat, you show up when it's hard, you push through the soreness. That's what discipline is. It's showing up for yourself when the feelings fade. It's holding the line when the high wears off. It's deciding that the words you speak to yourself are not up for negotiation. You said you wanted peace, speak peace daily. You said you wanted confidence, speak boldness, even when you're scared. You said you wanted freedom, speak liberty, even when chains try to whisper your name. And when the old voices come back, and they will, you have to be ready. Because just because you spoke life doesn't mean death are now being tested in fire. Now that's when discipline takes over. That's when you make the decision to keep speaking, even when you don't feel it. That's when you choose to stay in alignment, even when your emotions try to pull you back into old patterns. Because what you consistently say is what you eventually become. I know you want transformation. I know you're tired of cycles. I know you're done with temporary fixes. The change is not magic, it's muscle. And that muscle is built through repetition, through practice, through the decision to keep showing up for yourself over and over again until it becomes who you are. Don't just talk to yourself when you're desperate. Talk to yourself when things are going well, so that when storms hit, your soul already knows the sound of your strength. Don't wait for a crisis. And now you know you can get back up. You can talk again. You can walk in discipline even when it hurts. So now, this is not about a temporary shift. It's about a new rhythm, a new mindset, a new atmosphere in your soul that you protect at all costs. You're not waiting on inspiration to talk to yourself. You've made it a discipline. You've made it a lifestyle. Because when you turn discipline into devotion, everything changes. When you stop treating your words like a reaction and start using them as a weapon, mountains move. When you stop needing outside motivation and start building your own inner fire, that's when you become unstoppable. This is more than a challenge. This is a call to show up for yourself like your destiny depends on it, because it does. So when these 3 days are over, don't stop. Don't settle. Don't silence the voice you've been fighting to hear again. Keep talking. Because now you know the most powerful voice in your life is your own.